Hi everyone and welcome to Things That Matter, another exciting venture into the world of Tony Tonkin and Avery Hilditch. And the question that we're asking tonight is, United States a democracy? And if anybody is smart enough, bright enough and clever enough to join in this conversation, please feel free to do so. But of course, right at this particular moment, I'd like to welcome Avery to the show. Hi buddy.
Hey, how are you today?
Good. So I guess we'll just launch into it, mate. I don't know how long this is going to take.
Yeah.
Probably forever. But we are going to talk about why is the US a democracy? What do you think?
The answer is no. What's the next video we're going to do?
What does a democracy look like? Would be the next one.
Yeah. Is the United States truly a democracy? I've got to say the answer is no. When the founding fathers set up the government, they were very worried about the big cities overriding the the rural areas, and they didn't want them to dominate. So they came up with this idea of the two senators for each state. They also came up with the idea of an electoral college, and with the electoral college, what happens is that in each state has their own rules about how the voting will go, how it will be administered, how they'll count it, when they'll count it, things like that. In a state like Pennsylvania, they've even got different rules for different counties. So Allegheny County might count the votes in a different way and at a different time to the way, say, Philadelphia County would tabulate the results. At the end of it, they say, well, this state is going to that candidate, and they in a state like Pennsylvania, the winning candidate gets all of the electoral votes, college votes. In other states, they are apportioned out according to the percentage of votes that a person might get. Then round about the 15th or 10th of December, something like that, about a month after the election, the Electoral College meets, and then they vote. And one of the problems that they've got is that I see that they've got is that when the Electoral College vote, they are not compelled to vote according to the votes that were allocated by each state. Pennsylvania might be awarded to Biden, we'll say, in this case, and the Electoral College says, no, we're going to give it to Trump. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. So really, the election isn't being decided by 156 million people who voted, or a number around there somewhere. It can be decided by 538, the current number in the Electoral College.
Yep.
There is nothing democratic about that.
Yeah. So you're saying basically because at the end of the day, a final decision can be made by the state. So does that mean then if you had a Republican governor and a Republican legislature in that state, that they then could control or decide and make the decision as to who is president?
I don't believe the governor does or the legislature do, but they appoint the electors on the electoral college, and those electors then make the decision, and they could, if they wish, say, no, we're going to give the vote to that person because that's who we wanted to win. Okay. And they can just some of the states say that whatever the vote is, that's where it goes, and some states say no, they can choose.
So what do you have any idea as to what may happen if that is the case? Like what would happen in the US if someone apart from the electors chose to make that decision?
If the Electoral College says we're going to award it to that candidate, then that person is president, even if they didn't win the Electoral College, didn't win the 270 Electoral College votes. They won 240. We'll say the Electoral College could still potentially say that person is president, and that is the result of the election. It's decided by the Electoral College.
I guess the other thing too, Avery, that we need to think about is that in this country, in Australia, a majority of voters will determine to a large extent, won't they? Even though, but we don't have a president either. So when you think about it, which is the more democratic? The fact that they vote for the leader of the country because they have a presidential system, where we have a parliamentary system or a Westminster system. So, and we don't elect our leader. The party of the party that wins the most seats are the ones that select who the Prime Minister will be. So could we argue then that is not democratic because we're not, as a group of people, we're not selecting our leader?
Well, when we vote here or in the UK, yeah, you're right. The party that wins is the one that determines who the Prime Minister is going to be. A difference between us and the United States is that if we say Scott Morrison was as incompetent as Donald Trump is, say he was a sexist, racist, malignant narcissist like Donald Trump is. I'm not going to hold back, by the way.
I need. You're drawing a very fine line here, though, mate. So
Why is that?
Well, one could argue that Morrison is a malignant narcissist, but not to the extent that Trump is. And he has got some failings.
He does.
Nowhere near the same as what Trump is.
Yeah.
And, he is part of the religious right, which Trump proclaims to be, but isn't really.
Trump is anything but a Christian or any other religion. His religion is Donald Trump. That's the only thing he believes in. The difference between the system that they got in the United States and the system that we've got here is that if our leader proved to be incompetent and the party agreed, they can just sack him. They can, the party can just convene a meeting like we had several times over the past few years, convene a meeting and give him the boot. They can't do that with the president. So the United States has been stuck for 4 years with an incompetent.
Yes, and I guess I'm just trying to draw up the comparisons here. Here in Australia, our head of state happens to be the governor, does it not?
No, the head of state in Australia is the Queen of England.
Well,
the Governor General is the Queen's representative.
Well, that's right. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah. So, but that person, we discovered in 1972, did we not, that person can have reasonable power. But they're not an elected official either.
No. 1972.
Or 74, whenever it was. Whenever Whitlam got kicked out.
Yeah, that was around about. I thought it was around. 74. I think was more like it. But anyway, I know what you mean. We suddenly found out that that the Governor General had powers that nobody knew that he had. But the point there is that.
Yep.
The head of state was able to say this guy should not be in office, and for whatever reason it was. Having read all about the dismissal, I think the reasons were valid. But the head of state was able to kick him out. The head of state in the United States, the only way he can get kicked out is either by impeachment for high treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors.
So I guess the point though is what decides what is a democracy? Is a pure democracy a place whereby the majority of the people, if the majority of the people elect a certain person or party, then that person or party governs?
Yes.
And so I guess what I'm saying is that in the US, firstly, that's not the case. Because the majority of the people don't. It's this electoral college thing they have. But in Australia, we do have exceptions to our rules too, don't we? Because the Governor General, the representative of the Queen, can also sack under the advice of what would be determined to be the majority leader at the time, which in that case was Fraser, would be able to sack somebody as well, which in itself is not democratic, is it?
It isn't, but it does give a means by which an incompetent prime minister can be removed from office. We've seen in the United States 4 years of incompetence. We've seen in the past since February, nearly 250,000 Americans have died because of Trump's concern has been, how do I get re-elected, rather than what do I need to do to combat this horrible disease that is that's running rampant in the United States. As I said earlier, his concern is what's good for him, not what is good for the country. Here, if it'd been Scott Morrison like that, he could have been removed from office. You ask the question, what is democracy? Democracy is the rule of the will of the majority of the people. So 50% plus one gives you a majority. That makes you the prime minister. It makes the election democratic.
I think it was Rousseau. I'd hate to quote a philosopher and give them credit where it wasn't due, who suggested that a true democracy was about consent. So it was about everybody, a consensus rather. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it was about having consensus, so that we could all come to some sort of agreement around whatever the issue was. The issue is that in the United States, to get rid of somebody, you've got to wait for a new election. Right? Basically, or you got to impeach them. And as we've just been proven, impeachment is very hard if one side of politics governs or controls a particular portion of that government, which is in this case the Senate. So I guess the question is, do we ever reach a sense of a true sense of democracy if we find that it is difficult to get consensus amongst the majority?
Well, one of the problems, whether it's the United States or here, is that whoever the party is that is in power, it seems to me that the other party, the opposition party, is going to say they suggested it. That's not, it doesn't matter how good the idea might be. We're going to oppose it. There's far too much partisanship nowadays, and not enough effort by either side to try and meet somewhere in the middle. So it certainly can happen. The COVID here has proven that the Labour Party, who's in opposition, can work with a coalition party to implement policies that benefited the country. I mean,
so did you think then that the national cabinet was a good idea?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in one of my favourite politicians, even though he's right wing, and my favourite quote about democracy, Winston Churchill, all right, he said that democracy is the worst type of government that there is, apart from all the rest. And I agree with him.
Yeah, he's basically saying it isn't great, but it is.
It's not perfect.
Yeah, it's the best we can do. I mean, the best we could do would be total consensus on every decision, which was Rousseau's model. But we don't get that. Neither will we ever get that.
I mean, that's unrealistic to expect that. But there is no sound reason why the Labour Party can't work with a coalition when the coalition is in government, and vice versa. There's no sound reason why the Democrats can't work with the Republicans, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. All it requires is the will of the people in the governing body. In the House of Reps, the Senate, in both countries. Yep. If the will is there, that we to work towards the best possible outcomes for the country, then they can do it. World War II is a really good example. The Conservatives were in power in Britain. Labour Party were in minority. They formed a national government that comprised Conservatives, Labour, and Liberal Party, as they had then, and that government all worked together with one aim, which was to defeat Nazi Germany. They were, so they're a prime example of something where the government can work together. The different parties can work together.
So, but back to our original point, though, Avery, which was really about whether the United States is a democracy. If all you're arguing about, I think, is the use of the Electoral College. Are you not?
Yeah, because with the Electoral College, this election right now, Biden is something like 3.9 million more votes than Trump has got. In 2016, Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump did, about 3 million more, 2.8 million. In 2000, Al Gore got more than George W. Bush got, and yet George W. Bush became president, Trump became president, and it's possible that Trump will become president again with a minority of the votes.
And I guess
democracy is the rule of the majority.
And I guess the other issue, of course, is the stuff that Trump's throwing out there at the moment in relation to fraudulent casting of ballots, and the Democrats somehow have mastered this master plan. I was watching Stephen Colbert today, actually, and he was saying it's a genius. You know, the fact that this genius is that all the Democrats in each state have kind of got together and masterminded this conspiracy against Donald Trump and the Republican Party is a bizarre notion to start with, and I just wonder whether, you know, and him going to the courts and doing all that sort of stuff, is not listening to the people and being a person of extreme power and authority, and acting like an autocrat. Is that a danger of something like the American system, though?
I think it is, yes, because of the fact that it takes basically an act of Congress to remove an incompetent president. You know, it needs a majority in the House of Reps to impeach. It then needs 61 votes, I think it is, in the Senate to convict. And even then, if they get that 60, they can get that majority in the Senate, 61 votes, and they can still decide we're not going to remove him. You know, Bill Clinton was impeached in the Senate. He remained as president, and he was a far superior president than the one that they've got now.
Yeah. I guess my point is that the idea around democracy is somewhat vexed, because number one, there's no such thing as a perfect democratic society, because that's just unachievable. Number two, we have machinations of democracy, whether it be the Westminster system, which is in most countries that were populated by the British, and then we have, you know, sort of presidential systems around the world that some of them emulate the UK, and America is one of them, in a way, in terms of the two houses and stuff.
Yeah.
But then we have a man like Trump, who's extremely powerful, and can make decisions that can impact many people's lives. We have a ministerial system, which means that it is the government itself that makes those decisions based on a collective view by everybody that's in the cabinet. That doesn't happen in the United States either, does it?
No, it doesn't. The president, the prime minister here cannot issue an executive order. I want something doing, I'm just going to sign a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Can't do that here. In the United States, Trump wanted to ban all Muslims entering the country. So he just signed an executive order saying no Muslims can enter the country. He lost the court case, as he should have done, but he was able to do it. He is, to date, he spent a lot of time in the campaign in 2016 criticizing the number of executive orders that Obama had written, and he's on par to beat him this year, compared to the total that Obama issued in 8 years. You know,
Oh, right. Yep.
just by fiat, this happens.
Yep.
By fiat, transgender people can no longer serve in the U.S. military. By fiat, we're going to take that money away from defence and use it to build 5 miles of wall, which he claims is 120 miles.
But in a true democracy, even those sorts of decisions would be fraught with danger, wouldn't they? And they did in the US. I mean, I think so many generals and others came out against some of those decisions. So public opinion. So there's the other issue about a democracy, I guess, is that public opinion may eventually change the views of those that are governing. So, and we see that in countries where they rise up against their autocrats. So I guess the other argument here for me is that democracy can be governed by the people, because the people may rise up, they might become violent, there might be a civil war, whatever it is that they do, but at the end of the day, they may change the government and turn it into something else apart from what it was.
Yeah, a good example of that from the 1980s, Solidarity in Poland. A mass movement by the trade unions against the against the Polish government led to the toppling of the Polish government, and democracy, a democratic government, was elected eventually. Exactly that, what you're saying about public opinion, but the nature of the government in Poland was different to the nature of the government here or in the United States, and it was a lot easier, I think, in some ways for in Poland for it to happen than it would be in the United States. I can't remember the name of the Polish prime minister or president, whatever they called him, but he came to the conclusion that it's untenable to remain here in government with all this trouble that's going on. Trump would never do that.
Yeah, but I
think Scott Morrison would.
I think good point. I think the issue though is that Trump, that any despot who realises, particularly that, and I guess a lot of these countries have change of governments because there's a coup, and because the military in particular suggests that this particular person needs to leave. I think that in the US we're unlikely to see a coup because they're so friggin' patriotic and all that other sort of crap. But we may see enough people, I guess if enough people stood up against Trump, particularly in his own party, the Republican Party, then maybe we'd be more likely to see some sort of significant change if that did happen.
I can't see it happening. People like Lindsey Graham, Jim Jordan, Mitch McConnell, they are spineless. McConnell, his only interest is packing the federal courts with conservative judges. They've appointed something like 200 federal judges in the past 4 years, and then now 3 on the Supreme Court. Every one of them has been a conservative. They haven't appointed a single liberal judge, and not one of them has been anything other than white-skinned.
Sorry, where's that?
In the United States.
In the United States, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is one. I think there is one judge, isn't there, who's African American?
Yeah, Clarence Thomas.
Thomas, that's right.
He was appointed, I think, by, it might have been George W.
that
appointed him. He's the only. He's a black man. There's Sotomayor, who's Hispanic American, but neither of those were appointed by Trump.
And interestingly enough, there's are there any Latinos?
Sotomayor.
All right, and anybody who's gay or lesbian?
You're joking.
Well, doesn't have to ask.
They may be. They're Republicans, So
you never know what's hiding in the closet, do you?
You don't. There's 7 of the 9 are Catholic in SCOTUS, How is that representative of the people of the United States? Maybe there should be a gay person. Maybe shouldn't be 7 Catholics. If you're representing the country, there should be more Protestants, and then more atheists, and then Catholics, because there's more atheists in the United States than there are Catholics now.
So there should be some sort of
you'd think it would be representative.
Well, one would hope that it would be, but it's not. So, and the other thing that fascinates me about the US is their devotion to the Supreme Court. Like in Australia, if you asked, who's on the Supreme Court?
Judges.
99% of us wouldn't have any friggin' idea.
Yeah.
I don't know who's on it, and I take a reasonable interest in politics because the High Court doesn't play any role, really, major role, I guess, in determining the way our Constitution affects us in terms of things like abortion rights and. I guess it could, but it doesn't.
It does because if a law is passed that is contrary to the Constitution, it's going to be the High Court that determines.
But
whether that stays on the books.
Yeah, or but the United States, like Roe versus Wade, they don't have. That was challenged in the High Court, and was agreed to be valid, I guess.
Yeah.
But we just don't seem to have the range of controversial decisions made around legislation. Like we've got bloody Clive Palmer taking WA to court for closing borders and stuff like that. But to me, that's about as highfalutin as it seems to get in this country.
Oh, a big difference. What's one of my favourite topics? One of the big differences between the United States and here, as far as that is concerned, is the number of evangelical Christians that they've got in the United States. They have got a vested interest in having conservative judges on SCOTUS, who will hopefully, in their mind, strike down Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, but to be fair, we've got a conservative Christian evangelical prime minister, haven't we?
Yeah, but we don't have nearly half the country that are evangelical Christians who are actively campaigning to get evangelical Christians elected into Parliament, who are actively campaigning to get them appointed to the High Court.
But then, look, mate, I've got to say this, that there's some things about the US that just confound me. Now, in I can't remember which state it was that just decriminalised cocaine, heroin, and something else. Now, we, in this country, as good an idea as it is, wouldn't do it.
No.
But somehow in the US, what a contradiction. They're so right wing generally. Not all of them. There are some progressives, agreed, but generally they're right wing, even amongst the Democrats. That define that they're prepared. Marijuana being legalized in so many states in the US just blows me away.
Yeah.
And here in Australia, we're yet to raise that flag, buddy. I can assure you.
Yeah, and the sooner the better. Whether it's the United States or here, if somebody is addicted to a drug, they've got a medical issue that needs addressing. Not a criminal one, unless they're going out selling it by the kilo. That person should be in jail. But the person who goes and pays $25 or whatever it happens to be for a hit of heroin, methamphetamines, they need treatment. They don't need punishment. In the United States, it's punishment. It's all punishment.
Yeah, and I guess
severe.
Yeah, and I guess the issue is that the confusion is how can they on one hand be so liberal, but on the other hand be so extremely conservative? It just confounds me that they can be so progressive, really, but they can be so in so many other areas just a pain in the ass.
Yeah. I mean, some of their ideas are really good. A novel idea that somebody had was a universal healthcare system.
Oh, I thought that was a stroke of genius. Yeah. Who would have thought in the rest of the world?
Who'd have thunk it? Yeah,
Yeah. Like like there wouldn't be any other countries in the world that would have a universal
Oh
health
God, no!
system, would there?
Every country like that has a terrible health system. I mean, we've got a terrible health system here because we've got the universal healthcare in Germany and France and Britain and Sweden and Finland and
Canada.
Switzerland and Canada is terrible because
That's
it's
right.
all free at the point of use.
That's
How
right.
bad is that?
And the biggest problem we have where there's universal healthcare is the number of people that's stacking up in the emergency rooms. But at least they can get a bed sometimes.
Yeah.
And the length of time that it takes sometimes to be seen. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I can't remember the last time I paid for a medical bill.
Neither can I.
So,
I'll be paying for one next month, but I'm aware of that.
Let's not go there.
No, we're not going there.
But I think, I guess back to that point that they can be so progressive in some areas, but so super conservative in others. And the issue for me, does that come down to a sense of a corporatization of everything?
Oh,
If-
yeah. A country with 45% of it that are evangelical Christians, and what do they worship? The almighty dollar. Everything in the United States is about money. Trump is all about money. It's Democrats as well. I'm not going to stick this just to the Republicans.
No, don't. I think it's a cultural
Democrats
issue.
and Republicans.
But it's a cultural issue in the US, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because-
they are owned by the corporations.
I must say, this is like changing the topic, but I was horrified the other day to see that Pfizer are one of the organisations that our government's gone into bed with over the vaccine.
Yeah.
Like my God, these. Look, I appreciate someone's making a vaccine. I don't criticise anybody. Any organisation or company comes up with a COVID vaccine, I think it's fabulous. But the fact that our government's churning out a few $1 million to these companies so that we could get it first horrifies me.
Yeah,
So it's like they're betting with these organisations like Pfizer that they will produce it first, and therefore so we've got our hand in that pot before it's even released.
Yeah. Personally, as far as that is concerned, I'd rather wait for one that's proven to be effective rather than get the first one that comes out.
Well, I think there are the Therapeutic Goods Association or whatever they are
Administration.
TGA, that's right. TGA will have to approve it before it gets released to the public. But my issue was that I reckon that pharmaceutical companies were when COVID happened. I'm not dealing with a conspiracy theory here at all, but I reckon they were rubbing their hands together, thinking, "Fancy this! We've got an infection that covers the world, and we have the opportunity to produce a vaccine for it. Fabulous!"
I imagine the CEOs of people like J&J and Pfizer and Purdy's and things like that in the United States, they would have been salivating at that.
They would have. And the other thing I just wanted to talk to you about too was this notion around. I think we talked about it somewhere before on this channel, but American exceptionalism.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we're now arguing whether they are a democracy or not, and I think any blind man could have a look at this and see that clearly they're not the democracy that they claim to be.
Yeah.
But does that water down this sense of exceptionalism that they hold, that they think is just so damn important?
Well, who is it that says that they are exceptional?
They do.
They do.
All the time.
Right. All the time. We are the greatest country on earth. We've got the greatest democracy on earth. We've got the greatest scientists. We've got the greatest universities, the greatest health system. Blah blah blah. We are the greatest.
We're the greatest. We're the greatest capitalist country in the world because we consume more goods than anybody else.
Yeah.
And we also have the greatest army.
Yeah. They've got the greatest of everything. They've got to be the best at everything.
They have They have the greatest number of people ever to win Nobel prizes.
Actually, if you want to go down that path, and the people that have won the most Nobel prizes are Jews.
Well, they're probably all American.
An awful lot of them came from Israel. They're 25% of them, or something like that, of all Nobel Prizes.
Yeah, but in science, apparently, this is what they kept on telling us. They have one more. I don't know which sort of nationality or what religion they belong to. But at the end of the day, they believe that they are the great. And look, I think one of the things that excites me most about what's happening at the moment, I'm full of fear, because we don't want Trump necessarily to win this election. But the greatest thing that can come from this is the Americans can wake up one day and say that we're effed.
Yeah. Well, if I think that if Trump is declared the winner, they are. It's goodbye USA.
Yeah, I mean, it's been busily destroying the USA now for 4 years.
Yes.
He's done a fabulous job of it too.
Yeah.
Must be commended for that.
There's another thing I've just remembered about. I mentioned it briefly right at the beginning about, is the US truly a democracy? And I said no. What's the next video? One of the other things that they've got is every state gets 2 senators, right? Sounds fair. 50 states, 100 senators, sounds fair. You get a state like North Dakota with about 600,000 people, they get 2 senators. That means 1 senator per 300,000. You get a state like California, 40 million people, 1 senator for 20 million people. What's democratic about that?
Okay. Avery, how many senators do they have in Tasmania?
1?
No.
2?
No.
Not sure.
6.
I know more about. Oh, okay.
So
I know more about US as far as that's concerned because of
I remember. I would invite you to join the Child Protection Party, mate. We could have a conversation.
Not that lot, no.
But not that lot. But and I mean that's an argument against our system as well. Is that
it is.
Wind up with so many people, and the other argument, of course, is we have a good system where we do redistribution after every election.
Yeah.
So which I think it used to be 71 member per 72,000 in the House of Reps.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. So and that seems to work. I mean, they in the United States, one of the issues they still have is gerrymandering. Yeah, because the states do it.
Both parties do it. I can't remember the name of the person. Only a few months ago, a Republican in South Carolina, it might have been, or Georgia, said that they know where all the Republican voters live, and they draw the lines accordingly to make sure that the boundary lines, to make sure that for that congressional district, they've got as many Republicans in there, and that's the right and proper thing to do.
And I discovered the other day, apparently, they do redistribute their electoral boundaries only when they do a census.
Yeah.
So how often do they do a census? Do you know that?
Every 10 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
So whereas we do it after every election, apparently, I think.
Yeah.
So, what was the other thing I was thinking of that made me think about that? It's gone. But this, I guess this sense of that they're exceptional, given that they exceptionally voted for someone like Trump or elected someone like Trump, does make you wonder. It really does.
Yeah.
How smart are these people really,
He promised that he would deliver them Supreme Court judges. He did. He kept his promise. I'm going to deliver hard right-wing judges on the Supreme Court because 45% of you want to get rid of Roe v. Wade, and I can see that I'll do my best to make sure it happens.
Yeah, and and then he gets rid of, the Environmental Agency.
Yeah. That's looking after his friends again because those environmental rules impacted the manufacturers and business owners, which the people that pay for the Republican Party, that pay for the Democratic Party. He got rid of them. The Democrats said, we'll take that hit of imposing these regulations, and Trump said, I don't care, they're gone.
And what about the
by executive order as well?
Yeah, and ripping like anything that has Obama's name on it, man.
Yeah.
It's gone. Like universal health care, and Obama made sure that that was as close as he could get, given the Republicans were knocking everything he did back. But that was the closest he could get, and it means that millions of people, 20 million people, I think, got health insurance that weren't able to get it before.
And about 110 million with pre-existing conditions.
Yeah, and Trump, yeah, that's right. And Trump was busily trying to rip it all down. And he was asked actually somewhere on the line, what was he going to replace it with?
Yeah.
And of course the response was, well, you just have to wait and see. I'm going to release it shortly.
Well, he's been saying we'll be releasing that plan in two weeks' time. He's been saying that for about 5 years.
Yeah.
Leslie Stahl, I think her name is, from 60 Minutes in the US.
That's right.
I interviewed him recently, and he kept saying, he said at the beginning, I've got the full plan all ready to go. And she said, when are you going to release it? And he said, in about 2 weeks, it'll be released. And she said, are you going to release it before the election? He said, well, we'll be releasing in about 2 weeks. And a bit more probing questions about the, I think she brought up pre-existing conditions. And he said, we'll be developing a plan to cover this. 10 minutes ago, he said that he had a fully developed plan. Now he's saying we'll be developing one. Once we got rid of Obamacare, we'll develop one.
I think the classic mistake he made was being born, but he had nothing to do with that.
Oh, that's a mistake his father made.
Yeah, but the classic thing was when he gave Leslie a large document. Did you see that thing? That thing he got, so it was massive, and it was thousands of pages or something, and it had in it all policies and a whole host of other stuff, but nothing. And it was supposed to be about the healthcare plan or the health plan, but there was nothing in it.
Yeah,
and it was full of paper, and there was stuff written on the paper, but it was all crap, So, yeah. And it reminds me of the Indian rope trick.
Yeah,
and how it was all an illusion. It's like his whole presidency has been about how he can fool millions and millions and millions of people. Just this stuff now about...
He's been very good at that.
Well, like going to court.
Yeah.
The reality is he has no substantive proof to prove that there's fraud of any description. And if you go to court, the first thing that you have to do to prove anything to a judge, I guess, is to have some evidence.
Yeah.
But he has none.
None at all. Glenn Kirshner has been going through the court cases that the suits that Trump has filed, and he's been explaining why each one of those, he says, will get thrown out, mainly because of lack of evidence. You've got to have something there.
Yeah.
You've got to have a there to have a there, as they like to say in the United States, and he has nothing.
No, it's just all smokes and mirrors. Now, before we go, just get back to so we've escaped from the original question a little bit, but I guess we've talked about it though, haven't we? Because
we have.
All these things are about to what degree do we see this as a democracy? Is it a form of democracy? Is it a Swazi sort of form of democracy?
Yeah, it's a quasi-democracy. The people do vote. It should be, everybody should be out there exercising that right to vote. I like the idea that we've got here of mandatory voting. In the United States, they would never countenance it. One of the things I think they could do to get more people out to vote in the United States would be to hold the elections on a weekend like we do, right? Where people, you take this election right now, people would wait 8 hours in line to vote. Well, you imagine if you've got to take all day off to go and cast a vote, and you're not going to get paid for that 8 hours.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? You're going to stay at work. You're not going to go out and vote.
Or you might do what a lot of people did, and that's vote by mail.
But that's all fraudulent. We know that because the stable genius keeps telling us.
It's true. That's true. So I guess I'm anxious to see kind of what happens. I think that look, as much as I indulge in American politics, I probably read and study more about American politics than I even do our own.
Yeah.
And given we have a political party and everything, that's a bit bizarre. But I find our politics is relatively boring, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And-
we've got a bunch of staid old gentlemen and staid, and staid young ladies or whatever, if however you want to put it, in the Parliament, who are generally pretty polite. They generally stick to the party line, but they will move. They will say, yeah, okay, that's not a bad idea. I'll give that our support.
And
But just far too partisan in the United States.
I guess you're happy to see Pauline Hanson's party take a bit of a dive.
It's
election?
not as big a dive as I'd like to have seen it take.
You want a complete wipeout?
A complete,
would have been,
wipeout would have been very nice.
exactly. But so I guess at the end of the day, we're probably in agreement that there is some reasonable debate about whether the US is a democracy given the current system.
Yeah.
Their founding fathers, as wise as they might have been, I wonder how wise they actually were. It's like this electoral college is like clutching at straws, I reckon.
Yeah, it's
what in the hell were they thinking at the time?
Yeah. Well, as I said, the idea, I think it was James Madison in one of the Federalist Papers, said that this is to prevent the bigger states and the big cities overwhelming the smaller states, the smaller cities, the rural area, and that's why they introduced the electoral college and why they introduced the 2 senators per state.
Yeah, but even if maybe so, but it's still about the populace, is it not?
Yeah.
And I wonder whether at that time they knew California would be so big.
No. How would they know that?
They wouldn't have.
They wouldn't.
Been,
you know?
And, so
in fact,
where did this idea come from?
When they wrote the Constitution, things like that, things like the Louisiana Purchase hadn't taken place, and that the Louisiana Purchase was not just Louisiana; it was 2/3 of the way up to Canada. It was about the middle third of the United States. What's now the United States was bought in the Louisiana Purchase. They had no idea that was going to happen.
And how many states were there to start with anyway? Do you know?
13.
Right.
That's why there's 13 stripes on the flag.
So these wise men who were just a bunch of old farts, to be quite honest, but nevertheless,
slave owners,
and slave owners and whatever. Yep, and probably not all that moral. But they have chosen that the United States should have a certain political system, which perhaps just doesn't fit with the day.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't. It might have been right for 240 years ago, but I don't think it's appropriate for today.
No, and that's the point. It refuses to be flexible enough to adjust to the changing times, changing demographics, and changing geography, for that matter.
Yeah. One thing I would do if I was in a position to make a change, right, I would scrap the electoral college. I would, which means then that the plurality of the vote wins the presidency. I would apportion the number of senators according to the population of the state. Right, because right now North Dakota with 600,000 people can override the will of California with 40 million people, because they've got 2 votes. Right, they've got 2 Senate votes. Is that democratic? I don't think it is. All right. Another change I would make is they've got 50 states with 50 different voting systems. Let the states determine how they're going to run elections in the state. But when it comes to a federal election, it should be one set of rules applying right across the nation.
I agree, and that's
just like we've got here.
Yep. So, and it just confuses everything, doesn't it? Because you've then like if you have to have a challenge of any description, it's about the state legislature and what they have done that is going to make a difference, as opposed to uniformity. But then uniformity of there are so many different rules about voting in the US. There are probably just as many rules as there are African states.
To vote in the US, I mean, you turn up to vote here. You turn up somebody says, "What's your name?" and you say Anthony Peter Tonkin. And they say, "Where do you live?" and you give your address. "Have you voted today?" You say, "No, I haven't." And they give you the ticket, mark you off, and give you the voting tickets, and tell you go over there and fill it out and put them in those boxes over in that corner, and you just go off and do it. In the United States, you've got to do things like sign that you've sign a book. You've got to produce your driver's license, something that's got your signature. Donate a kidney. It's all sorts of.
And you have to be registered for some.
And you've got to be registered. You can, unlike here, you can on the day in a lot of the states say, "I'm not registered to vote. I want to vote," and you fill out the enrollment and the registration there and then. In some states, but not in all.
Yeah.
50 states, 50 different systems.
Crazy, isn't it? I mean,
it's
just a crazy system. And so, and I guess those things that we're talking about water down the notions around a democracy.
Yeah.
And whether this is fair and reasonable,
The Republicans right now have been doing all they can to dissuade people from voting. I can't remember the name of the county, but in Houston, they one drop-off box for 4.7 million people.
Yeah,
right?
Crazy.
That was to stop them voting. Texas is notorious for doing things like every town would have a polling station, and they'd close polling stations all over the place. So you had to drive 70 miles to go and cast your vote. Well, who's going to bother doing that?
And I think, I do think one of the interesting things is that that the number of people on this election who have voted has outstripped. Well, I think Biden has had more votes for him than Obama did.
Yeah, and a big difference between this election and the 2016 one was that on election day, something like 78% of the total vote that was cast in 2016 had already been cast in pre-polling and mail-in voting, mail-in votes.
Yeah,
about 76% of it. Trump's problems right now is that all the votes that were counted first on election day, when the polls closed on election day, were the ones that were cast on election day, and now they're counting the ones that came in by mail. Yeah. So the country turned bright red. And he thinks it was probably a COVID map he was looking at, but the country turns bright red, and he thinks, "See, I've won it." Then things start turning blue because they've actually started counting the majority of the votes that have come in. And in states like Pennsylvania right now, Biden needs to win something like 63% of the vote in each county to win Pennsylvania. He's currently doing something like between 80 and 90% in each county of the mail-in votes.
So when you think about it, it was a stroke of genius, wasn't it? That in a way that the Democrats pushed for. Well, firstly, had COVID, which meant people didn't want to go out into public and vote, and secondly, pushed the idea around mail-in voting to get more votes cast. And that worked well. And then, but the confusing thing about that, I guess, was that the Republicans were told to turn up on the day. So they turned up on the day. They were the first votes counted.
Yeah.
Because the other votes were counted last. And it appeared that Trump was on the way to victory. But because of the mail-in voting, sorry, buddy, you're out.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah. It's certainly looking that way. And the potential right now, when I came through to make this video, in Georgia, Trump was leading by 483 votes with another 5,000 or so to come in. And
483, that all.
That was all. And of those 5,000 or so votes that are still to come in, a lot of them are in red counties, but Biden is scoring 67-70% of those votes.
How?
Yeah. There's one county there where if he gets the plurality of the votes, he overtakes Trump.
Wow. So the greatest country on earth ain't the greatest country. The greatest country on earth is not necessarily the best democracy one could have either.
No, I mean,
and there's the notions around exceptionalism are kind of being buried.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, our country, I would say, is more democratic than it's got its faults, but it's more democratic than the United States with its electoral college and its two senators representing 600,000 and two senators representing 40 million.
Yeah, I agree.
I would much rather live here than in the United States.
Well, I'd rather live here for a whole host of reasons. The primary one at the moment is we're COVID-free, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
And if anybody listens to this from overseas, can you remember that, folks?
Yeah.
This is the country that has dealt with COVID better than any other country apart from perhaps Singapore and Taiwan and a few other countries like that. But
right next door, we got New Zealand.
We have New Zealand. Great. Our friends, our brothers, whatever. Okay, Avery. Docs, thanks for the chat tonight, mate. I've really appreciated it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well,
I've been wanting to vent to somebody other than Sasha about this for a while. So,
and I'm sure she's grateful.
I'm sure she is. She's
but we just want people to remember to register. I haven't got the little graphic up yet. I must do that for this channel. But to subscribe and to register so that you can listen to Avery and I rave and rant about a whole host of different subjects where we're not. Well, there'll be things that we are concerned about that matter to us, and I guess that we want to talk about that with other people. So thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And wish everybody the best and keep safe.
Like and subscribe.
That's it.